Picture this, a single sheet of paper sitting on a desk in Berlin, and on that paper, numbers so terrifying that they spelled the end of an entire empire. But here's the thing, nobody wanted to believe it. So here's what I need you to do. Grab yourself something to drink, maybe some coffee or tea. Get comfortable, because what you're about to hear is one of those stories that sounds almost too insane to be true. But it is true, every single word of it. And if you enjoy this kind of deep dive into real history, do me a favor and hit that subscribe button, because you're going to want to stick around for more stories like this one. Trust me on that. Now let me take you back to March 17th, 1943. The war has been raging for years now, cities are burning, people are dying by the thousands every single day, and somewhere in Berlin, in one of those old government buildings with the high ceilings and dark wood everywhere, there's a man sitting at his desk. His name is Wilhelm Canaris, and he's an admiral, but not the kind you're probably thinking of. He's not commanding ships or planning naval battles. No, this guy runs something way more important and way more dangerous. He runs the Abwehr, which is basically the German military intelligence service. Think of it like the CIA, but for Nazi Germany. Now, Canaris is not your typical Nazi, and I know that sounds weird to say, but hear me out. This guy is old school, he's a professional, a career military man who grew up in a different Germany, a Germany before Hitler, before all the insanity. He believes in facts, in cold, hard data, in reality. And in Hitler's Germany, that's actually a pretty dangerous thing to believe in. So on this particular day in March, Canaris is holding this report. It's not thick, it's not fancy, it's just a few pages of intelligence gathered from German spies all over the world. But what's written on those pages, man, it's the kind of information that should have made every single person in the German High Command stop what they were doing and pay attention. Because what this report is saying, in very clear terms, is that Germany is about to lose the war. Not might lose, not could lose, will lose. And the reason? A factory. One single factory in America that nobody in Berlin wants to believe actually exists. Let me paint you a picture of what's happening in the world at this moment. It's early 1943, and if you're sitting in Berlin, things are starting to look pretty rough. Just a few months earlier, in February, the German army suffered one of the most devastating defeats in military history at a place called Stalingrad. You've probably heard of it. It was brutal, absolutely brutal. Over 300,000 German soldiers were surrounded by the Soviet army in the middle of winter, and they were systematically destroyed. The ones who didn't freeze to death were either killed in combat or captured, and those who were captured, well, most of them never came home. This was a massive psychological blow to Germany, because up until that point, the German military had been basically unstoppable. They rolled through Poland in weeks, they conquered France in about 6 weeks, they pushed deep into the Soviet Union, they looked invincible. The propaganda machine had been telling the German people that their soldiers were the best in the world, that German engineering was superior, that victory was inevitable. And then Stalingrad happened, and suddenly people started asking uncomfortable questions. But it's not just Stalingrad. In North Africa, things are falling apart too. The famous Desert Fox, Field Marshal Rommel, the guy who was supposed to be this brilliant tactical genius, he's getting pushed back by British and American forces. The whole North African campaign is collapsing. And now, for the first time, American soldiers are actively fighting German soldiers, and they're not rolling over like the propaganda said they would. So the cracks are starting to show. But here's the thing about the Nazi leadership. They don't want to see the cracks. They've built this entire system on the idea of German superiority, this racial ideology that says Germans are just better than everyone else. And when reality starts contradicting that ideology, they have a choice: adapt to reality or deny it. And guess which one they chose? Adolf Hitler, at this point in the war, is becoming more and more disconnected from what's actually happening. He's spending most of his time at his headquarters, either the Wolf's Lair in East Prussia or the Berghof up in the mountains. He's surrounded by yes-men, by people who are too scared to tell him the truth, and by people who genuinely believe the propaganda they've been spreading. So he's living in this bubble where Germany is still winning, where every setback is temporary, where willpower and determination will overcome any obstacle. Into this bubble, Admiral Canaris is about to drop a bomb. Not a literal bomb, but information that's just as explosive. His spies have been sending back reports from neutral countries, from Sweden, from Switzerland, from Portugal, places where German agents can still operate. And these reports all say the same thing. They're all talking about American industrial production, and specifically, they're talking about airplanes. Now, you have to understand something about World War II. It's not like previous wars. This isn't about brave soldiers charging with bayonets or cavalry galloping across fields. This is industrial warfare. It's about who can build more tanks, more planes, more ships, more bullets. It's about factories and assembly lines and raw materials. It's about steel production and oil refineries and aluminum smelting. The side that can outproduce the other side, that's the side that wins. It's really that simple. And the reports that are landing on Canaris' desk are telling him that America is ramping up production at a rate that seems, honestly, impossible. The spies are talking about this factory in Michigan at a place called Willow Run. And what they're saying about this factory sounds like science fiction. They're saying that this factory is going to be capable of producing a complete 4-engine heavy bomber every single hour. Not every day, not every week, every hour. Now, if you don't know anything about airplanes, let me explain why this is so crazy. A heavy bomber in World War II is not a simple machine. We're talking about something like a B-24 Liberator, which is the plane they're building at Willow Run. This thing is massive. It weighs about 18 tons when it's empty. It has 4 huge engines, each one powerful enough to be impressive on its own. The wingspan is over 110 feet. And inside this plane, there are over 1.5 million individual parts. 1.5 million nuts, bolts, rivets, wires, hydraulic systems, fuel tanks, instruments, guns, armor plating. It's incredibly complex. In Germany, building a comparable heavy bomber, something like the Heinkel H-177, takes weeks, sometimes months. German factories, which are supposed to be the pride of European engineering, are struggling to produce these planes at any meaningful rate. The idea that you could build one in an hour is it's absurd. It's laughable. It's impossible. Except the spies are saying it's not impossible. They're saying the Americans are actually doing it. And not just planning to do it, they're already ramping up to this level of production. The intelligence is coming from multiple sources. It's being verified through different channels. Even Japan, Germany's own ally, is sending back reports that confirm these numbers. Japanese naval attachés in Washington are observing American production, and they're absolutely terrified by what they're seeing. Canaris and his intelligence officers sit down and they do the math. If this is true, if the Americans can really produce one heavy bomber every hour, that means 24 planes a day. That means over 700 planes a month from one factory, one single factory. At the time, the entire German aviation industry is producing maybe a fraction of that number in heavy bombers across all of their factories combined. The implications of this are staggering. It means that no matter how brave German pilots are, no matter how good German engineering is, they're going to be overwhelmed by sheer numbers. It means the skies over Germany are going to fill up with American bombers, and there's nothing the Luftwaffe can do to stop them all. It means that German cities are going to be bombed around the clock, that factories are going to be destroyed, and the entire industrial capacity of Germany is going to be systematically dismantled from the air. And here's the really terrifying part. If the Americans can do this with bombers, what can they do with everything else? How many tanks can they build? How many ships? How many trucks? How many guns? How much ammunition? The numbers start spiraling, and the conclusion is inescapable. Germany cannot win a war of production against America. It's mathematically impossible. But there's a problem, a huge problem. The problem is that this conclusion contradicts everything the Nazi leadership believes about the world. See, Nazi ideology is built on this idea of racial hierarchy. Germans are at the top, the master race, superior in every way. And below them, everyone else is inferior to varying degrees. And America, oh boy, America is practically at the bottom of their list. In the Nazi view, America is a mongrel nation. It's a mix of different races, different ethnicities, different religions. It's chaotic, it's disorganized, it lacks discipline. It's run by what they call Jewish financiers and controlled by democratic weakness. Americans are good at making consumer goods, sure, refrigerators and cars and radios. But real industrial might, military production, no way. That requires the kind of discipline and organization that only a racially pure, authoritarian state can provide. That's what they believe. So when these reports about Willow Run start circulating, the reaction from the Nazi leadership is not concern. It's not alarm. It's laughter. It's mockery. They think it's propaganda. They think the Americans are lying, inflating their numbers to intimidate Germany. They think it's a psychological warfare campaign. Because the alternative, the idea that these numbers are real, is just too terrible to contemplate. The first person who needs to hear about this is Hermann Göring. Now, Göring is a really interesting character in this whole mess. He's the head of the Luftwaffe, the German Air Force. He's also the second most powerful man in Nazi Germany after Hitler himself. He's a World War I flying ace, a genuinely brave pilot back in the day, and he's got this massive ego to match. He sees himself as the ultimate authority on everything related to air power. But by 1943, Göring has become kind of a joke. He's enormously fat. He's addicted to morphine. He's more interested in looting art from occupied countries than actually running the Luftwaffe. He lives in this fantasy world where the Luftwaffe is invincible, and any bad news is just temporary setbacks or lies from defeatists. So when Canaris or his officers present these findings about Willow Run to Göring, his response is dismissive. He literally laughs at them. There's this famous quote where Göring says something like, "The Americans cannot build airplanes, only electric iceboxes and razor blades." He's joking, but he's also serious. He genuinely doesn't believe Americans have the capability to outproduce Germany. Canaris tries to push back. He's got details, specifics. The spies have reported on the size of the factory, on the assembly line techniques, on the workforce numbers, but Göring won't listen. To admit that these reports are accurate would be to admit that he, Hermann Göring, has completely failed in his job. It would mean admitting that his intelligence was wrong, that his Luftwaffe is about to be swept from the skies, that everything he's been telling Hitler is a lie. And there's another element here, too. If Göring accepts these reports, he has to explain them. And how do you explain them within Nazi ideology? How do you explain that a mongrel nation of inferior races is outproducing the master race? You can't. It doesn't compute. It breaks the entire worldview. So instead of accepting reality, they reject reality. They decide the reports must be fake. Now, Canaris is in a really difficult position. He's got intelligence that could potentially save Germany, or at least force Germany to radically change its strategy, maybe negotiate peace while they still have some leverage, maybe redirect resources, maybe do something different. But he can't get anyone to listen. And the final arbiter, the one person who could make a decision that matters, is Adolf Hitler himself. Getting information to Hitler at this point in the war is incredibly difficult. Hitler doesn't want to hear bad news. He's convinced that the war is a test of will, that if Germany just believes hard enough, if they just fight hard enough, they'll win. He's surrounded himself with people who tell him what he wants to hear. Military briefings have become these strange theatrical performances where reality is bent and twisted to fit whatever narrative Hitler prefers. Hitler's view of America is complicated. On one hand, he kind of respects the size of the country, the population, the resources. On the other hand, he has complete contempt for American culture and society. He sees it as weak, as decadent, as corrupted by Jewish influence and racial mixing. He said things like, America is a country without culture, a hodgepodge of peoples who will never be able to organize themselves into a real fighting force. So when information about Willow Run reaches Hitler, either through Göring or through other channels, his reaction is predictable. He doesn't believe it. He thinks it's propaganda. He thinks it's a Jewish plot to demoralize Germany. The numbers are inflated, the reports are fake, the whole thing is a deception campaign. And here's where it gets really tragic. There's a guy in Hitler's inner circle named Albert Speer. He's the Minister of Armaments and War Production, and unlike a lot of the other Nazis, Speer actually understands industrial production. He gets it. He knows how factories work. He understands supply chains and logistics. And later, after the war, when he's being interrogated by the Allies, Speer admits that he knew that if the American production numbers were even remotely accurate, Germany was finished. But he couldn't say that to Hitler. To say that in 1943 would have been suicide. You'd be labeled a defeatist, maybe even a traitor. So he kept his mouth shut. So this critical moment passes. The report that landed on Canaris's desk in March 1943, the report that should have changed everything, it gets buried. It's dismissed as enemy propaganda. The spies who risked their lives to gather this information are basically told they're wrong. The admiral who tried to sound the alarm is viewed with suspicion, and life in Nazi Germany goes on as if nothing happened. Meanwhile, half a world away in Michigan, the impossible is becoming reality. Let me tell you about Willow Run, because this place is absolutely incredible. It's built on what used to be farmland just outside Detroit. The factory is designed by this architect named Albert Kahn, and the main building is it's hard to even describe how big it is. The main assembly building is one single room that stretches for over half a mile. That's not an exaggeration. It's literally half a mile long, and it's wide enough to fit multiple assembly lines. The building is so big that it actually creates its own weather inside. I'm serious. Clouds would sometimes form near the ceiling because of the temperature differences and all the moisture from the workers. People who worked there said you could be at one end of the building and you literally couldn't see the other end. It just disappeared into the distance. Now, the whole concept behind Willow Run is revolutionary. Henry Ford, the guy who invented the assembly line for cars, he makes this bold claim. He says, we can build airplanes the same way we build cars. And everyone in the aviation industry thinks he's crazy. Building cars and building planes are completely different. Cars are relatively simple. Planes are incredibly complex. You can't just apply the same techniques. But Ford and his production manager, this guy named Charles Sorensen, they figure it out. What they do is they break down the B-24 bomber into subassemblies. Instead of building the whole plane from start to finish in one place, they build different sections separately and then put them together at the end. The wings are built in one section, the fuselage in another, the tail in another. Each section moves along its own assembly line, and then they all come together. And here's the really clever part. They simplify everything. Every single task is broken down into something so simple that someone with minimal training can do it. One person's job might be to drill holes in a specific pattern. That's it. They drill the same holes over and over all day. Another person's job is to rivet a specific panel. That's their whole job. This means you don't need highly skilled craftsmen to build a plane. You just need people who can follow instructions and repeat a task. And who are these people? This is where the story gets really interesting, because the workforce at Willow Run is the complete opposite of everything Nazi ideology says should work. At its peak, Willow Run employs over 42,000 people. And these aren't all white men with engineering degrees. About a third of them are women. Women doing jobs that before the war they never would have been allowed to do. They're operating rivet guns, they're working welding torches, they're assembling complex machinery. There's this whole propaganda campaign around Rosie the Riveter. You've probably seen the images. The strong woman with her hair tied up in a bandana, flexing her arm. That's based on real women who worked in factories like Willow Run. There was even a specific woman, Rose Mill Monroe, who worked at Willow Run and became the face of the whole campaign. And it's not just women. About 9% of the workers are African American. This is 1943, remember. Segregation is still the law in much of America. And yet here at Willow Run, black and white workers are working side by side. There are also disabled workers, about 3% of the workforce. People who might have been dismissed as useless in Nazi Germany are here building the most advanced weapons in the world. The factory runs 24 hours a day in 3 shifts. It runs 6 days a week, sometimes 7. The whole place just hums constantly. Raw materials come in one end, aluminum sheets, steel parts, rubber, glass, thousands and thousands of individual components, and out the other end comes a complete bomber ready to fly. Now, the early days are rough. The plant opens in 1941, but it takes a while to work out all the problems. The assembly line is so long that they have this issue where the building crosses county lines, and they'd have to pay taxes in 2 counties. So they actually design the assembly line to make a 90-degree turn to stay within 1 county. They call it the tax turn. Giant turntables rotate the partially built planes around this corner. There are all sorts of problems at first. Parts don't fit right, there are bottlenecks in production, workers need more training. Some people start calling it Willow Run instead of Willow Run, making fun of all the problems. But slowly, methodically, they figure it out. They fix the issues one by one, and by the time we get to late 1943, early 1944, the factory hits its stride. And when it hits its stride, oh man, the numbers are incredible. They're not just meeting the projection of 1 plane per hour, they're exceeding it. At peak production, a complete B-24 Liberator is rolling off the line every 63 minutes. Let me say that again. Every 63 minutes, a complete 18-ton, 4-engine heavy bomber. It's mind-blowing. Think about what that means. Every hour, a new plane. Every single day, that's roughly 24 new bombers. Every month, that's over 700 planes from one factory. And this isn't even counting all the other factories in America that are building B-17s, B-25s, fighters, cargo planes, everything else. Back in Germany, the denial continues. Göring is still making jokes about American production. Hitler is still convinced that willpower will overcome industrial capacity. They're pouring resources into these wonder weapons, the Wunderwaffen. They're working on the V-1 flying bomb, the V-2 rocket, jet fighters like the Me-262. These are all impressive technologically, don't get me wrong, but they're building them in tiny numbers, and they're too little, too late. Meanwhile, the prophecy from that report in March 1943 is coming true. The bombers from Willow Run start arriving in England. They're assigned to the 8th Air Force, the American Air Fleet that's going to conduct the daylight bombing campaign over Europe. And the Germans are about to find out that the spies were right. In late 1943, the bombing campaign intensifies. At first, the Germans think they can handle it. The Luftwaffe still has good pilots, good fighters. But then the numbers start to overwhelm them. There are just too many American bombers. They come in formations of hundreds. The sky is literally filled with them. And for every bomber that gets shot down, 3 more takes its place. Then comes February 1944, and the Allies launch what's called Big Week. It's an all-out assault on the German aircraft industry. For 7 days straight, thousands of American and British bombers attack German factories. They're specifically targeting the factories that build German planes. The Luftwaffe throws everything they have into defending these factories, because if they lose them, they're finished. And the Luftwaffe gets absolutely slaughtered. German pilots are brave, they fight hard, but they're outnumbered, they're overwhelmed. For every German fighter that goes down, there's no replacement. The factories that build new planes are being bombed. The training schools for new pilots are running out of fuel. Meanwhile, for every American plane that gets shot down, there are 10 more being built back in America. It's exactly the war of attrition that Canaris warned about. It's not about who has the better pilots or the better planes. It's about who can absorb losses and keep fighting. And Germany can't keep up. The cities that Göring promised would never be bombed are being reduced to rubble. Hamburg is firebombed and tens of thousands die. Berlin is being hit regularly. Dresden will be destroyed. The ball-bearing factories at Schweinfurt, the synthetic oil refineries, the transportation networks, everything is being systematically destroyed from the air. And the planes doing this, a huge number of them, are B-24s from Willow Run. The factory that the German leadership said couldn't exist is now producing the weapons that are tearing apart the Third Reich. By mid-1944, the strategic bombing campaign has achieved its goal. The German war machine is running out of fuel. Literally, the refineries are destroyed. Pilots are being trained with less and less flight time because there's no fuel for training. Tanks are sitting immobile. The Luftwaffe is a shadow of what it once was. And through all of this, the Nazi leadership still doesn't really accept what's happening. They keep thinking there's going to be some kind of miracle, some wonder weapon that will turn the tide, some diplomatic breakthrough, some collapse in the Allied coalition. They can't accept that they lost the production war, and that was the whole war. So what happens to Admiral Canaris, the man who tried to warn them? His story is tragic. As the war turns against Germany, his accurate reports don't make him a hero, they make him suspect. The SS, which is run by Heinrich Himmler, sees the Abwehr as a nest of defeatists and possibly even traitors. They start investigating Canaris and his organization. And here's the thing. They're kind of right to be suspicious, but not for the reasons they think. Canaris isn't betraying Germany because he wants Germany to lose. He's trying to save Germany from itself. But more than that, he's become morally opposed to what the Nazis are doing. He's seen the atrocities, the mass murders, the concentration camps. This old-school military officer from the Kaiser's Germany is horrified by what his country has become. Canaris uses his position to help the resistance. He protects people who are plotting against Hitler. He provides cover for resistance members. He's in contact with people like Dietrich Bonhoeffer, the theologian who's part of the resistance. He even works to sabotage some German operations, like trying to keep Spain from joining the Axis, which probably saved Germany from even more disasters, but also cost Hitler a potential ally. Then comes July 20th, 1944. There's an assassination attempt on Hitler. A bomb goes off at Hitler's headquarters, but Hitler survives. And the Gestapo launches this massive investigation. They're rounding up anyone who might have been involved. And as they dig deeper, they find connections everywhere. They find that the resistance was much larger than they thought. And a lot of the trails lead back to the Abwehr and to Canaris. Canaris is arrested. They find his personal diaries, and these diaries reveal everything. His doubts about the war, his disgust with Nazi policies, his covert help to resistance members, it's all there. Hitler is absolutely furious. He survived the assassination attempt, and now he wants revenge. He wants everyone connected to the plot dead. And Canaris, who tried to save Germany with the truth, is now going to die for that truth. On April 9, 1945, less than a month before Germany surrenders, Canaris is executed. And the method of execution is particularly cruel. He's hung with piano wire, which means it's slow strangulation, not a quick death from a broken neck. It's brutal, it's humiliating, and it's done in a concentration camp called Flossenburg. Think about the irony here. This man saw the future clearly. He delivered accurate intelligence that could have changed Germany's strategy. He tried to save his country from destruction. And for this, he was murdered by the regime he served. The truth teller was silenced by the people who preferred lies. When the war finally ends, in May 1945, when the guns stop firing and the smoke clears, the final accounting begins. And the numbers prove that Canaris was right about everything. Willow Run's final production numbers are staggering. At its absolute peak in 1944, the plant is producing a B-24 Liberator every 63 minutes. Not every hour, every 63 minutes. By the time the last plane rolls off the assembly line in June 1945, Ford has built 6,972 complete B-24 bombers at Willow Run, plus another 1,893 in knockdown kits that were assembled at other locations. Think about what that means. One factory, in one state, in one country, produced almost 7,000 heavy bombers. That's more than the entire German aviation industry produced in comparable heavy bombers during the entire war. It's not even close. Across all factories, the United States produced over 18,400 B-24 Liberators, making it the most produced heavy bomber in history. But that's just one type of plane. In total, from 1940 to 1945, the U.S. manufactured over 300,000 military aircraft. 300,000! Germany, in the same period, produced about 94,000 combat aircraft total. Not even a third of what America produced. And Germany was at full war production for most of that time. They were supposed to be the great industrial power of Europe. The comparison extends to everything else, too. Tanks, ships, trucks, guns, ammunition. In every category, American production dwarfed German production. The United States built over 2,700 Liberty ships, these massive cargo vessels that kept the supply lines open across the Atlantic. Germany couldn't sink them fast enough to make a difference. There's this quote from an American industrialist named Wilhelm Canaris, who said, "We won because we smothered the enemy in an avalanche of production, the like of which he had never seen nor dreamed possible." And that's exactly what happened. Germany wasn't defeated on the battlefield, not really. They were defeated in the factories. The German soldiers fought bravely. The German generals were often tactically brilliant. German engineering produced some incredible weapons. But none of that mattered, because for every German tank destroyed, there was maybe one replacement. For every American tank destroyed, there were 5 replacements. The math was simple and brutal. And the truly tragic thing is that Germany had the information. The spies did their job. The intelligence was accurate. The warning was delivered. But the leadership couldn't accept it because it contradicted their ideology. They built their entire worldview on this foundation of racial superiority. Germans were better, period. And if the facts contradicted that belief, then the facts must be wrong. This is what makes this story so relevant even today. It's not just a World War II history lesson. It's a warning about what happens when ideology becomes more important than reality. When you surround yourself with people who only tell you what you want to hear. When you dismiss uncomfortable truths because they don't fit your worldview. The Nazi leadership made terrible decisions not because they lacked information, but because they refused to accept information that challenged their beliefs. They were defeated by their own prejudices. They underestimated their enemies based on racist assumptions. They assumed that a diverse democratic society couldn't organize itself effectively. They were wrong, catastrophically wrong. And meanwhile, Willow Run stands as a testament to something completely different. It shows what a free society can accomplish when it's united by a common purpose. The factory floor was messy. It was chaotic in some ways. There were people from all different backgrounds, different races, different genders, different abilities. In Nazi ideology, this should have been a weakness. Instead, it was a strength. Because when you let people contribute based on their abilities rather than their background, you unlock incredible potential. Those women who were told they should be at home, they built bombers. Those African Americans who faced discrimination every day, they built bombers. Those disabled workers who were considered inferior, they built bombers. And they didn't just build them, they built them better and faster than the so-called master race could ever dream of. The assembly line at Willow Run was a repudiation of everything the Nazis believed about human society. The legacy of March 17, 1943, that day when the report landed on Canaris's desk, extends far beyond World War II. It's a reminder that reality doesn't care about your ideology. The universe operates on mathematics and physics, not on belief systems. You can't wish away facts. You can't decree truth by force of will. The most dangerous walls aren't the ones made of concrete and barbed wire. They're the walls we build in our own minds, the walls that keep out uncomfortable information, the walls that protect our egos and our prejudices. Those are the walls that destroyed the Third Reich. If Hitler had listened, if Göring had set aside his ego, if the German leadership had accepted the truth about American industrial capacity, would it have changed the outcome of the war? Probably not. By 1943, Germany was already in deep trouble, but it might have saved lives. It might have led to an earlier negotiated peace. It might have spared German cities from destruction. Instead, the denial continued. The war dragged on for 2 more horrifically destructive years. Millions more people died. Cities were reduced to rubble. And in the end, the result was the same. Germany lost. But the cost of the denial was immeasurable. This story, buried in the archives for so long, shows us how history really works. It's not always about the big dramatic moments, the D-Day landings or the Battle of the Bulge. Sometimes it's about a single piece of paper sitting on a desk. Sometimes it's about a bureaucrat trying to get his bosses to listen. Sometimes it's about a factory in Michigan that nobody wanted to believe could exist. And sometimes the course of human history turns on whether people choose to accept reality or reject it. In 1943, the Nazi leadership chose rejection. They chose comfort over truth. They chose ideology over facts. And that choice sealed their fate more certainly than any battle could have. The spies were right. The admiral was right. The numbers were right. And nobody in power wanted to hear it. That's the real story of March 17, 1943. That's the day the truth came to Berlin, and the day the truth was turned away. So, there you have it. If this kind of deep dive into military history is your thing, there's plenty more where this came from. Matter of fact, I've got a video about the flying coffin, why Japan's deadliest bomber killed its own crews. You can check that out next by clicking up here, and I'll catch you over there. It's worth your time, I promise.